Hello and welcome to Addis Matters, our show on Ethiopian current affairs with me, Begna Simesso. This is part of our COVID special series where we analyze various impacts of the pandemic from political economy to social behavior, from religion and education to arts and culture. Today's focus is on political impacts of COVID-19 in Ethiopia. I have two guests to contribute to our discussion today, Kiram Taddese, freelance writer, and Samuel Getachew, reporter at the English Weekly Reporter. Welcome to the show and thank you for your time, views and insights. On March 13, 2020, the first case of COVID-19 was discovered in Addis Ababa. Since then, the number is gradually rising. The number of both infections and dead people is increasing. But the pandemic's impact is felt everywhere, almost on all areas of our lives. Schools are closed, churches and mosques are also closed, mobility is limited, economic activities have decreased. The Ethiopian political sphere has seen dramatic changes and developments. State of emergency is declared. Election 2020 is postponed again. First from May to August, now to unknown future date. Constitutional review process is launched with a view of extending the terms of the current government and also the parliament. Kiram, let me start with you. In the last 3 months, we have seen lots of changes in Ethiopian political sphere. Do you agree with my assessment of the three major upsets and shocks, or what's missing? What are the major impacts of the pandemic in Ethiopian political life in the last 3 months?
That's true. COVID-19 is, as a matter of fact, it's a global pandemic, and Ethiopia is not an exception. So you can assume or take any political ups and downs happening across the globe could happen here in Ethiopia as well. So by the same token, as you said, what's happening in United States political sphere could also happen here. So it's really is devastating in political wise, as we are expecting different activities for that matter. Election is a major, and the economic aspect is also one of the major to be affected. Yeah.
Samuel, would you like to add? I mean, what are the major political developments in Ethiopia in the last 3 months since the pandemic is declared?
I echo what was said by him.
Okay.
I think there's an assumption that the coronavirus is only affecting rich countries, and Ethiopia is no exception. But the numbers that we're seeing in Ethiopia is so low that many of us question if we are really getting the real numbers, because a country like Ethiopia, with a country that has no social safety net, a country that cannot even take care of its poor, can have only 2,000 infected patients, makes me question the whole process. In the United States, they're questioning the numbers that are being given by the president. And in Ethiopia, I really question if we are testing enough people to get the real numbers, or if the government is perhaps withholding some information from the public, and it shouldn't be.
I don't think the government is hiding, but it's a global trend. For instance, recently some reports claim that some 20 million SIM cards have been lost in China. And what's the number China has reported? The number of COVID-19 cases and deaths that China has reported. This is a question. And it's, I think it could be a matter of speculation. I don't know. But I don't think.
Yeah, it's a controversial issue. I mean, to a certain extent, I think I agree with Samuel. I don't know whether the government intentionally hides, but I question our testing capacity. It's very limited. We are not testing as many people as we should. And actually, a few weeks ago, probably 2 weeks ago, the head of Ethiopian Public Health Institute said it costs a lot. I mean, testing one person costs about $12. So if you multiply that, by number of suspected individuals who should be tested, the cost could be higher. And even current testings are supported by international partners such as the Jackma Foundation and others. So I think the economic issue is really important. There is a budgetary issue from the government side as well. But for sure, what we can say is the number of people infected by this pandemic are not only the ones probably stated by the Ministry of Health or the government. I think we can agree to that.
Going back to what you said about the lockdown in Ethiopia, the government always focuses on Addis, as if Addis is the only place that we should care about. When you go outside of, I went outside of Addis just to check, and they say there's no transportation that takes you to these places, but that's not true. I mean, you could just go to I was in Ambo, and everything is open. There was a funeral when I was in Ambo, and I saw more than 1,000 people just going to a funeral, and the police were just watching them as if there's no coronavirus in Ambo. And you say churches are closed, but there are many, many churches that are open. You can go to Mercato, and it's all the same. And again, it might be, we might have to go back to, is Ethiopia rich enough to have a lockdown? I don't think it is. The challenge is always about resources. Ethiopia lacks the resources to have a proper, to create a proper mechanism to protect citizens. We're a nation of more than 110 million people. The last count we had was in 2007. That was 13 years ago. So I think the whole system needs a closer look, and I also think we have to put the health of Ethiopians as a priority, more than perhaps planting trees.
I think it's getting a priority as we speak. For instance, recently the health sector alone gets 15 billion birr budgetary supplementary budget from the total supplementary budget. So that's something which we learn from the focus of attention is being given to the sector. But as Sami said, speaking of the lockdown, I don't buy the idea of locking down is best option for Ethiopian context. It's unthinkable,
The shortcomings of being a journalist in Ethiopia is when governments give us numbers, we don't have the resources to go and check. He mentions 15 billion, birr or US dollars. Government has always given us numbers, but have we really done the work going around and checking? Because when I go outside of Addis, what I see is it's a whole failed system. You go to a village and the government gives you numbers. So we've done this, we've done that. And the shortcomings of being a journalist in Ethiopia is we cannot go and check because we don't have the resources, and we don't even have the protection to go and really check if what the government is saying is exactly what's being done. It happens in the US. Look at the US government, the president, giving you different numbers, but they do have the New York Times, the Washington Post that are well funded to do the work. But in Ethiopia it's different. So I have to ask you, have you really gone and checked it out? I mean, so before you give us numbers, you really have to be careful.
Yeah. Well, the government said initially when the pandemic came, they are injecting about 15 billion birr to the economy. I think my understanding was, I don't know, some people were saying probably this is a return given back to the private banks for the bonds that they are paying to the National Bank. But I would like to ask both of you guys, the state of emergency has been declared almost for the last, I don't know how many, few weeks at least. So Sami mentioned, things are not changing. Ethiopia has seen other states of emergencies declared in the last 2 years. This one is the third one. But unlike previous state of emergencies, this is not handled by a command post. A group of a higher committee of ministers is managing it. But when it comes to enforcing the rulings of the states of emergency, I think there are issues. So how do you evaluate whether the state of emergency itself is effective to contain the spread of the virus, and also in terms of enforcing the regulations?
I'll give you a very practical example. A friend of mine had a barbecue at his place. 20 or 25 of them were just having beer and drinking and doing whatever young people do. He's not a friend of mine. He's a younger friend. So
you're young.
So this inspectors walked in and they said, "Oh, it cannot be done because there's a state of emergency." They made a scene. They were like trying to take people to prison, blah blah blah. And they begged them, so they left. So they came back the following day and they said, "Pay us bribes. You need to pay us." So the whole, it's not just in Ethiopia, but we see it in many developing nations, that bribes and corruption is huge. You can come up with different ideas, but unless you try to root out this corruption and bribes, the system, it's a catch-22. It's always the same. It's like going forth and coming back again. And Ethiopia has, again, we might be going back to resources because everything is done in Ethiopia through the funding of EU and USAID and so on. And I think Ethiopia...
So do you think probably deploying the army would have been a better option like previous state of emergencies? Some countries did that, even for the corona pandemic. So.
But in Rwanda, they ended up killing them. So we have to be careful. I mean...
we have extreme examples.
Ethiopians have a history of fearing the soldiers or authorities. And to go back to the last era in Ethiopia would be unbecoming of a Nobel Peace Laureate.
I think this comes with along with the lockdown issue. Whenever you order a lockdown, it comes with cost, social cost, and livelihood would be affected. So from the outset, government, including the Prime Minister himself, was issuing or warning of grave measures for those who are breaching the state of emergency. Is it practical? Because it's all about mindset of the society, and if one cannot feed himself or herself, how practical it would be for someone to obey the state of emergency.
Yeah. I think one of the areas where we see the impact of the state of emergency, in my view, is the election. The election is delayed, probably not necessarily only because of the declaration of the state of emergency, but definitely it's part of it. The election 2020 was controversial from the start. It was supposed to happen in May 2020, and then it was postponed to August 2020, and now because of the corona pandemic, it's again delayed to some unknown time. Now the big question is the path towards the election. The government wants to pursue a constitutional/legal path. Some political parties are calling for a political dialogue. Which is better, safest, shortest way towards the election?
I think we should suspend the election. I agree with Ms. Burtukan that the election needed to be suspended. If we had proceeded with the election, look what happened in Burundi. The First Lady, even the President, there's a rumor that he died because of COVID. He was campaigning in the open with thousands of people with no masks. So it would have been crazy of us to have an election of 112 million people who've never participated in a true democracy. The last democracy was some 15 years ago, but the result wasn't respected. So to have them embrace the biggest democracy we've never seen in Ethiopia, we also needed to protect their well-being. And I think the president or Ms. Burtukan made the right decision.
Is it Ms. Burtukan or the government? I mean, that's a tricky question, isn't it?
Whoever made the decision, that was a smart decision
principle, yeah,
made on the public interest.
And again, I go back to my idea of Ethiopia is not an exception. For example, in latest research conducted by the International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance, at least 56 countries across the world would delay elections, including Canada, United States, India, and of course Ethiopia. So this is not an exception for Ethiopia, and as it's a global pandemic, we may not consider something. This is something alien.
Canada never delayed the election. The election was not.
The US
I mean,
also
there are regional and national elections, and this assessment includes both the regional and national.
The whole
elections.
point is, I think it's a good decision that it was postponed.
But there are countries who did the election, like South Korea, for instance. I mean,
But you can't compare Ethiopia to South Korea.
yeah,
And of course, United States is planning to conduct the election, the upcoming presidential election, via mail. That's different from it should be contextualized. You know?
Yeah, I think it's understandable. I mean, delaying the election is understandable. I mean, everyone with the right mind can't say we can't have political rallies and campaigns. But the path that the government took to delay the election is the controversial one. In one hand, political groups were asking for a political dialogue, a more wider political dialogue with all the opposition parties included in it. But the government tried to pursue a constitutional path and a discussion amongst a very small circle, but which you may argue that it's a political discussion anyways, eventually, because the last decision will be made by the House of Federation, which is composed of 100% the ruling party. It's members of the Prosperity Party. So wouldn't it have been better to have an open discussion with all parties, with all players who are going to take part in the election, whether to delay the actual election or to form whatever arrangement? I mean, what's your view on that?
Democracy has always been messy. Ethiopian opposition, how many do we have? Like
107 something? Yeah.
I mean, we can't keep on having this kind of discussion, this Scandinavian kind of discussion in a country that really needs to go forward with an election. But I guess there has to be a limited discussion. I mean, we listened to the discussion that came out of the Sheraton with, PhD, like, those people don't really represent the public that needs democracy to change their own lives. But I guess there has to be some kind of discussion, but we can't have this kind of discussion forever. I think Ethiopians need to go forward. We need to be a country that embraces democracy. We've talked about it for the last 15 years. It was messy, the last many young people died, including at the Addis Ababa University. They've paid a price with their lives, and I think the Ethiopian government, the Ethiopian society owes them that much. And we've put so much pressure on Abiy, partly because he won the Nobel Peace Prize, partly because he's promised this kind of change for the last 2 years. And without comparing him to the last 27 years, I think Ethiopia needs some kind of election, and there has to be a transition process. Maybe we need a caretaker government, as Jawar might have. I mean, anything that comes out of Jawar, we always have to question it because he's taken a side. He's a political now. But there has to be a serious discussion outside of the Sheraton, outside of this PhDs that come from South Africa, from anywhere they come from. But Ethiopians deserve not just promises, empty promises, but real action. When I say real action, I don't mean the soldiers going and killing Ethiopians.
I think I take the idea Sami mentioned earlier. Whoever is taking the lead in delaying or postponing this election is responsible for me at this point in time, in particular, because as he said earlier, we have 100 and something political parties who never delivered a single point or agreeable or consensus who never come to a consensus. So they lack the art of consensus from the start. So how could you expect
And
to
probably
deliver a nation after some kind
What's
of...
missing in Ethiopian politics, from someone who's observed it from afar, is the lack of young people. All this opposition are from another era. They're at the end of their retirement ages. For them to even understand that young people need to be engaged, even for them to go out and have a discussion, is a challenge. I think it's something that's really missing in Ethiopia. It's
That's one of my
among the
questions,
opposition.
actually. I mean, you know, there are like semi-formal structures in different parts of the country. We have the Keros and the Fanos, the Ejato, and we now have even Zarma and Funkel even in Tigray, of all states, of all places. But they are not like formally represented in the political dialogue of this country. I mean, the political parties, which are 107, 108 parties. When it comes to election, I can understand that they are the major actors because the parties are the ones who are going out to be elected, who are going to do the campaigns. But what do you think would be the roles of these youth structures, this semi-formal structures of the Keros and the Fanos and the Ejatos, the Zarmas and the others?
As far as I'm concerned, no one is legitimizing their existence. No one claims they belongs to this or that, but they are doing whatever they want.
But on the other hand, all of them tries to to have a stake on them. The Jawars and his group says.
So it's very important
like
here.
The facto leader of the Kero.
Yeah.
And even
I understand that, but it's very important to organize them and give them a real identity, a legitimate identity, which would make them responsible in a way, whatever they are going to do. And are we going to see the Ivory Coast after election? We know what was happened in Ivory Coast back in days during the Laurent Gbagbo time. So are we going to deliver a country like that after having a legitimate youth group who can go around the street and do whatever they like and irresponsibly? So that's something.
All these young people remind me of the Black Panthers in the U.S. From a historical aspect. Or the Black Lives Matter movement in the U.S. It's the idea of wanting to belong. Some of them are violent. I mean, I've seen it up close. But it's the idea of wanting to belong in a system that has always rejected them. For the last 15 years, Ethiopians have been listening to this song saying Ethiopia is the biggest economy in the world. And when they don't have anything to eat, or their lands are being taken away from them, or the idea that it's taken away from them. Some of them have no land, but it's the idea of the government taking or ownership of their own lands. It's expected that there will be some kind of violence. Just look at the U.S., Black Panthers, Black Lives Matter. It's the idea of wanting to belong. And some of the young people that are coming out of this movement, I call it a movement because it's a movement. It's something that's being talked about in the White House, in Congress, and among the whitest white people in the U.S. That are endorsing it right now. This is our version of the Black Lives Matter with all these young people from the north, south, east, west, anywhere. In Addis, it's them wanting to belong and wanting to be heard. And they're Ethiopians. They need to be listened to.
So we can probably conclude, I guess, the election is delayed for sure, so there has to be ways of engaging the youth to be active members of the election process and the political life of the country. I think we can agree to that.
It seems certain that as we are speaking, the constitutional inquiry, the Council of Constitutional Inquiry has already proposed to delay the election from 9 to 12 months. So
the leaks, it's not made public yet, but there are leaks, circulating on social media about the recommendations of the Constitutional Council.
In the 1992 election in the U.S., the whole slogan of the campaign was, "It's the economy, stupid." So a young person in Adama or Tigray or anywhere, Wallaga, I don't think they even understand what the Constitution is. they just want to, most of them really want to change their own lives by working, by talking about investment, the kinds of investment the area needs. And some of them don't need to move out of their own village. They don't need to come to Addis Ababa. There's a misunderstanding whenever I go to anywhere outside of Addis, that they need to come to Addis Ababa to be successful. How about a government that wants to make them successful wherever they are, instead of having them come to a city that is just overcrowded? And that's the kind of discussion they need: employment, jobs, and education. When I say education, I don't mean the kinds of education that are just printed on a piece of paper and handed to thousands of Ethiopians every second week. I mean real education that makes Ethiopians compete, not just within Ethiopia, but Africa, anywhere.
And that's the ultimate purpose of federalism, surfacing the discussion table, right? To include everyone, for those federal states to execute their responsibilities and deliver what they use.
Talks like constitution is something we understand, or the professor from the Sheraton really understand. But outside of the Sheraton or our circle, I don't think Ethiopians really understand their own. I've never read the Ethiopian constitution myself. I have.
So that's funny.
It's a fact.
Yeah. Through the entire process, there is a dilemma of missing out between the social psychology and the economic impacts or costs of this entire process. As you said, the constitution, blah, and blah.
So you guys it seems like you're more for the political dialogue than the constitutional discussion that the government tries to follow in terms of delaying the election. Is that like your feeling, Sami, in particular, because you mentioned the Sheraton meeting twice? And
I mean, I looked at the Sheraton conference, like just on TV, and I can see some of the EU people I knew from working at that small Sheraton circle. It was something pushed from the European Union. I can see, because some of them were just visible behind, Maaza and all of them, Wizaro Maaza. I don't think the government really, perhaps I'm wrong, I think the government just wants to show or wanted to put a show for Ethiopians that they're doing something. But if they really want to do something, I think they need to push it outside of this small circle and give it to the public through an election process, instead of just saying, oh, we're doing this and doing that.
But this discussion is about the election itself, isn't it? Like whether we should have it or not. So, I mean, to a certain extent, I understand why the government wants to do it through constitutional or legal means, because every discussion, whatever types of discussions, has to happen within a certain kind of legal framework. But on the other hand, I mean, the funny part of it is we know what the government wants. The end is determined before even the discussion started. The government wants to extend its terms. Its terms, both the executive and the legislative branch. The parliament wants to extend its term from 5 years, which is ending in September. So in one hand, I can understand, I share your frustration that it's just a show, it's like a drama.
But the Ethiopian parliament, I mean, it's, as you said, it's 100% the government. It's just people that, I remember in 2016, the former prime minister talking about a different side of politics than what Abiy is preaching now, about peace and all kinds of stuff. And they were just there, just clapping, just standing ovation for everything he said. And they're doing the same thing with Abiy. So it goes to show you they're just a bunch of powerless people that are just there representing whatever the government agenda gives them. So I'm just saying, don't put too much trust or confidence in Ethiopian parliament system, because we've never had an open election in Ethiopia. It's always been a government that wins by 100%, 99%. That's like Saddam Hussein kind of politics. There was a state or a province in Canada that in 1987 they had an election and a liberal government won 100%. And instead of celebrating, the person who won went on stage and said, there is something going on with our system. we have to fix it because we need an opposition in governments or in parliament. And the whole system was changed enough to produce a strong opposition after 4 years. So there has to be that kind of idea with our political leaders in Ethiopia. And also, if I can add, a few weeks ago, the Commercial Bank of Ethiopia closed its doors for 4 days to try to digitalize the whole system. I went on a Monday morning because I had a check I needed to deposit, and the whole system crashed in the first hour of its opening. And now when you go past by commercial bank branches, there's like a huge lineup of people. So it's a missed opportunity that we can't have an election through a system that we always have to line up like Africans, line up for hours, sometimes for days, like we saw in South Africa with Nelson Mandela's time, that we can't elect. Well, I'm a diaspora, I can't even elect, I'm just talking on behalf of my. So we can't elect people by a system instead of using paper or the old ways. Our banking system needs to change. The way we elect our people needs to change. If COVID won't push us to change and digitalize our system, we're going back to 100 years.
Yeah, probably that could be part of another discussion, but the government's intention of digitizing the economy is, I think, probably highly supported by. So, Kiram, would you like to add something?
We cannot deny the role the executive organ is having in this country. Whoever comes and goes within the parliament, the executive organ is
the strongest
and powerful. So speaking of this election, I would like to have more trust on the executive organ. That's my personal opinion, than the parliament.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Why?
Because as he said, the parliament has been clapping for everything that has been said time and again. So why would you expect something new? And rather, we're witnessing something new from the new prime minister who is leading the executive organ, the CEO of the country. So
but the parliament is the one who is supposed to represent the people, isn't it? I mean, party loyalty instead of constituency loyalty is the problem.
In this particular time, they're not even sharing, they're not speaking same tone, right? TPLF has already left, the squad.
Yeah.
So what kind of parliament are we referring? Are we talking about the parliament?
PP plus TPLF.
Maybe it seems.
I mean, to me, honestly speaking, I mean, comparing the parliament that we used to have in this country for the last, 20 years, this one is a bit different because at least we have now an opposition party, which is TPLF. Funny how it changed to be an opposition. I mean, it has followed its own course, but I mean, it's predetermined. Again, the boring side of it will come. Whatever the prime minister says, TPLF opposes. We understand that. But at least there are dual voices.
That's where the irony of election comes. That's where the irony of election comes.
Yeah.
I wonder, for instance, TPLF is, pushing to hold its own election, right, at the regional level. And what would be the result? And what are they going to deliver, after all? Legitimizing the what? They're going to. They believe that they are going to win, right? That's understanding, from my observation. So that's an irony for me.
It's funny that you said the TPLF is the opposition, but we see what they do with the opposition within their own state. So I think the whole system needs a wake-up call, not just the kinds of preaching that we keep hearing from Dr. Abiy, but it has to change.
With the election, as we speak, the House of Federation is contemplating on its decision on the election. We've seen leaks coming out and circulating on social media. Maybe we shouldn't talk about that much until it's proven, but I'm sure it is what it is. The decision, it seems, the election will be postponed. Postponed until the pandemic is declared no more a threat to public health. Yeah. So we don't know how long that will take. 3 months, 6 months. And then after the WHO and Africa CDC, the Ethiopian Ministry of Health, the Ethiopian Public Health Institutes, and the scientific community, there is such a word, the scientific community declared COVID-19 is no more a public health threat, then the government will have an election between 9 to 12 months period. That means we don't know when. At least for sure we can say the election is delayed by about a year. The Speaker of the House of Federation has resigned in the last minute. Do you think it will have any impact whatsoever on the process? Because the reason I'm asking this is the Prime Minister once said the House of Federation is led by a TPLF, which is an opposition sort of. So because of that, it's independent. The Prime Minister did say that. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, it's not the right words. Now she's no more there. So again, it's back to square zero. The House of Federation is again 100% PP. What should we expect? And
I think we need to make correction there. The House of Federation, to my take, is not a house that represents a political.
It represents nations, nationalities, and peoples, but they are members of the former EPRDF and the current PP, isn't it?
So, in principle, let's assume that they're.
They represent their nations, nationalities.
You know, in many Western countries, when you have speakers are elected by the members, look at Canada, for example. There's a minority government led by Justin Trudeau, and there's a Conservative, and there's NDP, and there's Greens. If you say you've elected an opposition, you are really electing an opposition, like a Liberal electing Conservatives. It's rare. Even in Canada, it rarely happens. But when you say, when Abiy comes out and says, or Dr. Abiy comes out and says, they've elected a speaker that's an opposition. Well, the last election, this coalition had 100% members. What opposition is he talking about? Just because they have differences created by the last 27 years that pushed Ethiopians to embrace our Amhara, Oromo, Tigray, blah, blah, instead of our citizenship that should be in a country like Ethiopia. I question the whole willingness to really, if the government really understands what an opposition is and what the role of a speaker is. And again, the House of Representatives is 100% the same people with the same ideas. It's only through an upcoming election we might see a real opposition by the opposition we see. But the shortcoming of the opposition, what disappoints me about the opposition is there are so many of them, and it's just an accident waiting to happen.
Yeah. Last question to both of you. Tigray is going in a different direction, and the Tigray regional state has been claiming that it will have the election and the period proposed before, which is August. Do you think it's going to happen? My feeling is it's not going to happen. It will be delayed. What do you guys think?
Legal-wise, it's inappropriate, and I don't think it's going to happen because the National Electoral Board of Ethiopia, the director, Ms. Brtukan, was rejecting such interest move from the Tigray, and she is the one who is handling this matter at this point. And as we heard from the Prime Minister, he had tough exchange with her, so she might be the Iron Lady that we have there. So it might be difficult, It
was interesting for me to hear the Prime Minister, admiring Brtukan Mideksa as ever and saying she's a very strong woman and she rejected having the election, even if the government wants to have it. But in my view, the recent interview she gave to a media from Tigray region, actually, she said the reason that they are delaying the election is because of basically the state of emergency and the lockdown or the partial lockdown measures that the government is enforcing. They need to train election officials, they need to organize election observers, they will have to do lots of logistics work, importing the ballot paper and distributing. They can't do that under a state of emergency. So when the Prime Minister said the government wanted to have the election, it was the election board that rejected it. it's a bit.
But to be honest, I don't think the election board was ready to have an election. It was a gift for them. This COVID, for some people, is a gift.
Yeah.
So for
they are
Burtukan and her team, it was a gift that came at the right time. But going back to Tigray, I spent 2 weeks in Tigray, taking a tour by myself, taking public transportation, and at the end I had a conversation with the president last year. There is a strong sentiment with the Tigray region that Addis Ababa or the government does not represent them. There's an assumption that Abiy is working against them. I don't think Abiy has been able to really answer that sentiment. In politics, there's perception, and there's also a real interest. You know, yesterday he was saying they've sent 46 million birr to Tigray and all kinds of stuff. Unless you really explain where the money went or how he paid or how he gave them the resources to protect themselves in COVID, there's an assumption that the government is ignoring them. And that's the kind of sentiment I saw in Tigray. And I think Abiy has ignored them. But has he really ignored them? But perception is more important than real intention. I can send 100 million birr to Tigray as a president or a prime minister unless I go there to visit them, have a conversation with them. The regional government will always say, oh, look, he's ignoring us, without giving him a credit. With the election in Tigray, you know, there has been elections. There was a conservative government in Alberta who decided to have an election and elect its own senator. But it doesn't mean the federal government will recognize it. I mean, they can have elections all they want. Why not just ignore them? It doesn't mean the government will recognize it unless it's recognized. I don't think it's accepted.
Yeah, whether it happens or not.
I had little conversation. What would be the next move for the regional state? They might go with legal interpretation, like you said, what has happened in Alberta. So that might be sensible. But again, what's the ultimate goal? There was this federal movement, right? Kind of a federalist.
The Federalist coalition.
Coalition movement. What was the ultimate goal of forming that coalition? So, who are these people? Are they going to? What are they going to deliver after the election? And really, what's the purpose? And I think the question of a unified Ethiopia is at
question mark.
Question
the de facto state will probably happen.
Something, yeah.
I think we are running out of time. We are coming to an end. The biggest takeout of this discussion is the youth needs to take part in the political dialogue, in the political life of this country. I hope political parties, both the ruling party and the opposition, listens to this advice. Thank you both for your contribution. Samuel Getachew, a reporter at the English weekly The Reporter, and Kiram Taddese, freelance writer. We are coming to an end. This is the end of our show. We will have another guests and another topics. Until then, goodbye from me, Begna Simesso, and the team at Addis Matters.